Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Deep State. Today, we have a special guest with us. She's a follower of the channel, and she's going to talk about a few of her experiences that she thought that were relevant to what we've been discussing lately on the channel. Her name is Brianna. How are you doing today, Brianna?
Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So there's a few different topic areas that we wanted to go into. Before we begin, you had a prayer for us. Do you want to start that for us?
Absolutely. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and thou shalt renew the face of the earth. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Excellent.
Thanks.
So we had a video a couple weeks ago with a special guest, Jesse, and I think that maybe set some bells off for you. And so some of the things you wanted to talk about pertained to some of the things he was
Sure.
discussing. He's the ex-Mason that had these hospital experiences. You can begin anywhere you want. And did you spend time in healthcare throughout your life?
You know, um, I started as a CNA after high school and worked as a CNA in a nursing home, did some home health care for a little while. And then for most of nursing school, I worked as a phlebotomist or someone who runs around the hospital drawing blood. Did that in a level 2 trauma center for like half of nursing school. And then out of nursing school, worked as a registered nurse in adult critical care and did that for 10 years before I finished my doctorate in nursing as a family nurse practitioner. And then I joined the outpatient side of things. And it was a year and a half later that, the world turned upside down and everything that I, committed my life and time and effort and lots of money to um, isn't, I realized it wasn't what I thought I was signing up for. I just wanted to help people. And
So I think you can maybe get a sense from Brianna's accent. She's from the upper Midwest, so we'll kind of just paint a general picture of where her experiences are coming from. So I'm imagining if you jump back to 2019, your mindset was different from where it is now. So events in the world made you think about things, events in healthcare made you think about things. Please pick up the story wherever you would like.
yeah, so I guess working in the hospital setting, at least, in my region of the United States, there were things that, of course, weren't perfect, but, I think the care that was delivered was good. Probably, definitely better than some areas, and other areas were better than us. But, there were always things like working short-staffed or being forced over at the end of your shift and um, patients being discharged from the hospital before you felt like they were really ready, or, a lot of things that we would have said it's a broken system at that time that, you wouldn't have guessed that, wow, it's suddenly going to get a lot worse. And, you know, just looking back, like, I was working in primary care when COVID started. And, just recalling the months leading up to it, fall of 2019 going into spring of 2020, a regular cold and flu season, you would have the regular upper respiratory stuff. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, what's happened? These people are dropping like flies. What's going on? There wasn't anything. It was, you know, looking back, I think that the main thing that changed, that happened, was how things were portrayed in the media. Um, what our perspective was on the cold and flu season, that someone would actually care to identify the virus that they were stricken with when they had an upper respiratory infection. Um, One thing that I was thinking about when all of this was, well, the first thing that kind of rose a red flag when everything was happening, I'm like, well, this isn't right. When the mask recommendations came out. And, you know, my time in the hospital. And I think, anyone who has worked in a hospital setting and has to get fit tested for an N95 mask. And if they don't pass the fit test, they have to wear the PAPR or the full hood respirator. So to say that the COVID virus is smaller than, the tuberculosis germ, however, lower level of protection is acceptable, makes no sense. So I'm like, okay, this makes no sense, and at that time it was kind of, well, something is better than nothing. And yeah, it might not be the best, but if we can, kind of do some damage control with just, the cloth masks or the surgical masks, I'm like, what's the point? Like if this really was such a threat, if COVID was so deadly that we really needed to protect our lungs and, everything from it entering our body, wouldn't we say like good enough is not really good enough? Like, if you really don't want to die, you're gonna go to, the Home Depot or something and get a HEPA furnace filter that's going to have the same filtration capabilities as the N95 respirator, and you're going to seal it around your nose and mouth with duct tape so nothing can get in. That's what I was thinking. Like, so, I was kind of like, all right, this just doesn't make sense. And then I was remembering back to 2009 when the H1N1 little outbreak happened, and we ran out of N95 masks in the hospital that I was in. And yeah, people were coming in with, influenza, and they would get, or, it would turn into pneumonia. And then that is what would lead to them being hospitalized and in the ICU and all of that stuff. And there was a shortage on masks at that time because we weren't prepared for that. And it didn't make the news. No one cared. We might wear the same mask and keep it in our pocket for, typically we would have two patients. I'd have a mask in my left pocket for that room and a mask in this pocket for that room for the whole shift. And I didn't get sick, and it was, we got through it, and some people died, sadly, as they do every season, but it wasn't, blown up in the media as far as I remember. Am I going down the
No. I mean, my
coherent
first,
path?
yeah, I mean, if it's starting with the mask thing, I, I don't want to sound like a know-it-all, but I was kind of predicting all this stuff before it went on. But I remember one of
Sure.
the first things was um, my parents are friends with somebody from a major university that's the head of the kinesiology department, and he sent my mother. My mother sent me. This is when it was still going on in China and stuff. And you got to remember, Fauci goes, "Oh, masks, they don't do anything," and then a week later, "Oh, y'all need your masks."
Yep.
And he sent me and the peer-reviewed information was quite thorough that they're worthless. Now, I don't know why they wear them in Japan all the time or anything, and I don't know everything. Frankly, I'm not that interested. But my thing out of the get-go was, this is a social control. That was my own, boom, and but you're still kind of
And even at that, I would say up until that time, like I was not awake, I guess,
Mhm.
to everything that was going on and the interconnectedness behind the scenes of everything. I would like to think that I would recognize right from wrong and good from evil, and I would do my best to choose good over evil. But like, I didn't follow politics. I mean, not that I'd follow them now or anything, but just to just see the blatant hand of evil at play in absolutely everything. Like,
What I'm kind of
yeah,
interested in is as you're waking up and saying, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, and how, as you're maybe starting to be suspicious and connecting dots, the part of your story I'm kind of interested in, then when you kind of communicate your questions to other people, that part of it, how did it work that you decided that you're going to try to figure this out and other people are just going to, where's my paycheck?
sure. Well, so this would have been, well, I would say throughout the summer of 2020 and then heading into the fall, that's when there were a lot of mask mandates in community settings, not even in, outside of the healthcare settings. And I had a handful of patients who were requesting a note for a mask exemption for, a healthcare reason. And they varied from, young people worried about their skin and getting pimples to people with asthma and obesity that legitimately felt like they couldn't breathe with the mask on. And some of the more, sad and terrible situations that I think were very much overlooked are, people who have suffered trauma earlier in life. And, um, for example, a patient who was physically and sexually abused and locked in a closet with a bag over her head during these things, of course, covering her face with a material that was similar to something a bag was made out of was a huge trigger. And how do you go to work with that and function as normal and carry on as though nothing's happening when you're just reliving your trauma? So absolutely, I wrote notes for these patients because even if the masks were doing anything, I thought a few days of cold symptoms were better than the alternative. And um it was, let's see, there was one note that I wrote, and the patient of mine turned it into his employer, and the employer contacted the office to request clarification on the letter because, like, okay, well, if he can't wear a mask, is it acceptable if he wears a face shield? And I said, well, yeah, sure, if he feels like he can breathe with the face shield on, that's fine. So, well, whoever answered the phone and took that call kind of escalated things up the ladder. And the following Monday, I had no job. And they didn't, I mean, I kind of was guessing what it was about, but there was no reason. It was just kind of, you're done, get your stuff out, give us your keys and your name tag. And
Wow, I didn't
so
expect that came out of left field.
that
Holy
was,
smoke.
yeah. And yeah, it was, I have never been even like disciplined for anything on the job. I've always been a top performer. I take pride in doing a good job and, you know, having a high standard of care. And I like what I do. So that was extremely, surprising, crushing to my ego and everything else. But there were just so many weird things related to that, like not giving me a reason or anything, or not even say, yeah, fire me, but say, you wrote this letter and we don't agree with that. And because of that, you can't work here anymore. At least you tell me. Um, so I, um, well, a few months went by and my husband asked if I was getting unemployment. And I was like, well, no, I've never been unemployed. So I didn't even consider that option. So filed for unemployment, and they send you a letter that has the response of the employer, like regarding the case or whatever. So it has the reason for termination right in the unemployment letter. And it said misappropriation of company letterhead. So it was the letter that I wrote. However, I didn't actually use letterhead because I typed it up in the electronic chart and printed it. So it wasn't really letterhead. Like, how far do I want to take this? I kind of just, the rest of the world is crazy. It's not like I'm going to want to go back and take my job. So I didn't exactly pursue it a whole lot. I did try though. I'm like, well, I better just get some records just in case, down the road I want to prove that, I wasn't being a bad employee or whatever. To show that, for all of my reviews, I got perfect ratings. I was offered bonuses, that there was no disciplinary action on my record is really all that I wanted to show in case this was going to impact me in the future. So I contacted the Human Resources Department to request a copy of my employee file. And the woman said, oh, are you sure you want this? I'm like, well, yeah, that's why I'm calling you. And she's like, she's like, I see that you worked here because I can see your copies of pay stubs or whatever, for compensation. And she goes, but the only thing in your file is your application for employment. Like, oh, okay.
Okay.
So,
What do you, now that you can look back after a few years, what do you attribute this to?
well,
Because to me, it's
I
like they almost order from up high. If
that's
this is a crisis,
exactly, yes. Yeah.
there's,
It seems so
get rid of them.
orchestrated. And hearing other people's experiences, it's like, you know, I can't believe that, all of the middle management people who were the ones who I was actually dealing with in all of this, like that they actually knew everything that was going on, but they very much fell in line when, you know, pulled from their higher ups to, hey, this is what happens. And when someone's not falling in line, they have to go. And, um, yeah, so it really opened my eyes um to the evil behind all of this, and just the how so many things just don't, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, so that doesn't line up. And at what point do you just like for the folks who are still kind of um thinking that people like me are crazy and conspiracy theorists, and uh I don't know how else to convince them, but just to share my experiences about it. But um, a few other things, about just things that were happening before I was actually fired is just everything we were hearing about. The hospitals are just at capacity. One of the hospitals connected to my system even went as far as like creating extra beds like they closed the cafeteria and made it look like a big open hospital room with like multiple beds like you would see at some emergency response facility or something like that. And of course, none of them were ever used. And they had essentially like closed our schedule to in-person visits. So then if you were really sick or needed something, you were directed to urgent care or the ER. And otherwise, you had to have a telehealth visit. So, something like how we're communicating now. And I worked mostly with adults, older adults, and that was not something that they were embracing, at least at that time. Some of them probably didn't even have the internet or a device to connect. And then the ones who did, the technology was clumsy and it didn't work smoothly. And it was a huge mess and a terrible disservice to those we were responsible for caring for. So I had essentially long days in the office where I was not seeing patients at all. And I remember thinking, I'm like, well, this can't go on forever. There's I don't know, someone's either got to pay for this if I'm still collecting a paycheck. um where's the money coming from if we're not seeing patients? And um kind of felt like this couldn't go on for too much longer, and that shortly after I lost my job. But in that meantime, I did offer to say, like, hey, if the hospitals are so busy, like my background is in critical care, like, if I don't need training, I can, just show up and help, or whatever is needed, I'm happy to help. And at that time, when I was saying that, like, I had already had the like, hey, this isn't right. But at the same time, I also had the feeling of um, like my former colleagues on the front lines were suffering if they were working so short staffed, like I knew what that was like. And I felt like if I could help, I should. And so I, volunteered, and they said, well, maybe we could use your help as a provider. And I'm like, whatever is needed for help, I'll go. And so I had a day of kind of orientation and training in the hospital, and it was like a ghost town, and I couldn't believe it. It was like, wait a minute. This is not what's being portrayed. And most of the training was not on, the hospital protocol and procedure. It was, how to appropriately put on an isolation gown and gloves, and how to communicate with your patients that tested positive for COVID by using a phone and not actually going into their rooms. And I'm like, wait a minute, like it was that was almost as alarming as, I don't know, everything else that was going on. And so yeah, my name was on an on-call list for two different positions, and I was never called. And I spoke to friends and former coworkers who were still working in the hospitals, and a lot of them were being put on call. So what that means is there's not enough patients to take care of, so you get to stay home. We'll call you if we need you, and if you want to get paid, you have to use your own PTO or personal time off money to get a paycheck. So I'm like, I don't know, how is that happening? Yet the public believes that the hospitals are bursting at the seams. So
With a lot of people's stories, some people, it goes all the way back to 9/11 or different kind of, but so at one point something doesn't feel right. And then you're getting, I'm just kind of thinking, more information that this isn't just my hospital. This is hospitals throughout the country. Wait, this seems to be a lockstep protocol going on all over where people are experiencing this in the modern day of social media information. And then at some point, it's like this is seems to be somehow systematic, and there's a lot of lying going on, so it seems also evil. So then
Right.
people,
Yep.
at some point, something hits, and you go, "Wait a minute, there's a spiritual component to this." And some people get called toward the light, and some people double down on the deception. Did you find yourself
Absolutely.
in that crossroad?
Yeah. And, it was during that time that, the churches were also closed and we couldn't go to mass. And I, full disclosure, I do faithfully attend a Latin mass regularly. And before COVID, I had not. And there were I would say two things that kind of shook me enough to stumble into the Latin mass and stay there. And I would say the first, no, yeah, the first thing was when churches reopened, um, they were asking for more volunteers because a lot of the regular volunteers were older retired folks who were now too afraid to leave their homes and were only going to watch mass on TV, and which I was not willing to do because just something about, well, you can't attend mass without kneeling, and if you virtually attend mass, something about kneeling in front of a screen just doesn't feel right. So when, you know, the churches opened back up, I said, yep, of course, I will raise my hand to volunteer for whatever's needed to, get things back in full operation so we can have the sacraments. And I was asked to be a Eucharistic minister, which is in the Catholic Church, a layperson who distributes
Mhm.
Jesus in the Eucharist to folks coming up. And I'm like, well, I know I said I would do whatever was needed, but I can't do this. And I had not ever been to a Latin mass. I had not ever received communion on the tongue. So, my feelings, I don't think were based on an experience that I had in the past or anything like, or, a preconceived idea or something like that. I just felt like this hard stop, like, I can't do that. And the volunteer coordinator was like, well, what do you mean you can't do that? Like, why not? And then I'm like, well, that's Jesus. And I can't hold Jesus. And I'm like, I'm just thinking about, you know, the, the image of the Pietà and Our Lady holding Jesus. And I'm like, that I am, that I can't do that. Like, I can't just hold Jesus and hand him out like that. Like, I'm nowhere near worthy enough to do that. At the same time, I wasn't thinking like, who are these other Eucharistic ministers, you know, unworthily handling our Lord. My brain and heart had not traveled in that direction at that time. But so I kind of, said I would do other things, but I'm not doing that. So then they're like, well, with your background in healthcare, if you could just take people's temperatures as they enter mass. So I did that a few times. And then I'm standing there thinking, if someone has a fever, what am I gonna? I can't tell him he can't come to mass. Like, he should be here. Like, even if he has a fever, this would be a great place for someone who's sick. And so I kind of backed away from that as well. So it was kind of, like what was happening on the outside of losing my job and having, and it wasn't just being fired and kind of like, oh, you were a good employee and now you're nothing. It wasn't just that. It was, I felt like it kind of symbolized what I had worked for and, dedicated my life and time and finances and everything, ignoring my family to work extra shifts and, things that were never discouraged because when you work in healthcare, you're helping people. But then looking at the reality of what I was doing is, neglecting my family and taking care of strangers, which, yeah, not bad to help strangers, but bad to neglect your family when you're a wife and mother. Um, so I felt like I had to be stripped away of those things in order to see things for what they were. So what was happening on the outside in the world was happening on the inside within my soul of kind of seeing things too, and just the parallels between what was happening in the deep state and in the deep church. And that's a whole nother
Okay.
conversation that you've probably covered too.
As you're saying this, I'm just kind of trying to. So you go to human resources, and they've expunged you like your persona non grata. You probably have some contact with friends, and magically they don't seem maybe interested suddenly in knowing where you're at. Well, that's how people are. It's depressing when people leave. So see ya.
Oh yeah,
And when
absolutely. Yep.
you cut off, and like you say, um, that's kind of part of God's plan. That's part of how sometimes we receive grace in our brokenness.
Hmm.
Uh, so, I mean, you can go anywhere, but when did you start getting into figuring out the deep state and whatnot?
So, I had to do something. I don't know how to sit still very well. So I started volunteering, taking care of homeless, and, you know, not really having I had some goals of, what we would accomplish with that and everything, but it was kind of, um, something just to, yeah, absolutely to help them, to love God by loving others, but then completely self-serving in occupying my time and distracting my brain from the reality of everything that was going on. It was a real blessing to just stay busy. And at the same time, it was a breath of fresh air, because when you have these folks in front of you who are truly struggling with things, it was almost like they didn't have the capacity to take on something that didn't impact them, as far as a worry. If they had enough stresses as far as, were they going to have food later in that day, or whatever they're working on, or trying to reunite with their kids, or whatever XYZ, or um their real problems were so consuming them that they just didn't seem to appreciate COVID in the same way that the rest of the world was. So that was one thing that kind of stood out to me as well. And the other thing was that they weren't seeming to get infected in the same way that other people were. They weren't. You would
Yeah.
you would expect that if this was such a big deal, that, oh, I can't hear you.
We might have to restart here. Hold
Okay,
on.
well, I can hear you now, but now I can't see you.
Are you there?
I'm still here.
Okay, let's see what happens. Um,
Okay.
yeah, as you're talking about this, there's so many ideas, because the theme of my book is in pursuit of the metaverse. The metaverse is it's artificial reality, and you're thinking about going to a mass and we're going to receive Christ virtually, like it's like virtual reality. And a lot of these things, you start kind of going, and there is the people that quote unquote will go through the darkness in order to look at reality, which is
Hmm.
oftentimes, and other people don't want to go there. They want kind of an artificial version of events.
Yes.
Um, to them. So what happened next? I mean, when do you get into all the Freemasons and
Well, as a kid
the
who,
Illuminati?
so, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I think we're all familiar with the Simpsons episode of the Stonecutters. So that's when things started. I'm like, wait, what is this all about? But a couple of more things about the working with the homeless is that
Okay.
they, they weren't coming in with complaints upper respiratory infection or, what you would expect with COVID symptoms or anything like that. They were, regular stuff, joint pain from walking around outside all day, maybe the blisters on their feet, mental health meds, like kind of the regular stuff. It was like, it wasn't, they weren't sitting in front of a TV all day being shoveled all of this stuff. So like they didn't have the perspective to regurgitate what everyone else was. So that was very, very cool. And to experience that. The other thing was that when, the public health department or whoever would come and try to have, we want all the focus for all of the vaccines to be on the minorities and the underserved. So, well, in addition to everyone else, but special focus for these folks, they're disadvantaged, so they need more vaccines than anyone. Is no one cared, like they didn't care about the vaccines. There were only a few of them who would take them when it was incentivized. So they would offer them a gift card or, a coupon for a fast food place or, something like that. And then they would, okay, well, I'll take that because I'm hungry or whatever. But otherwise, the majority of them did not get it. And at least in the time that I was working with them, none of them were hospitalized for COVID. The community did have a thing set up where if someone did test positive or was sick, they were able to put them in like a hotel room while they were sick so that they weren't, in the larger open space getting everyone else sick. So that was good. The other thing, so the space that I'm in, that I'm actually sitting in right now, is in an old Catholic school building. The building, well, it's not run as a school, but the space is still owned by the church. And at the time, the homeless shelter was in this building, and I turned an old classroom into a little free clinic. And somewhere like right in we were still, cleaning out the space. We weren't even like fully open yet. Someone comes over and says that a gentleman from another parish in our community had called the priest here and said that all I'm doing here, and this is ridiculous because I don't know how anyone would make this, but that all I'm doing here is handing out birth control to anyone who wants it. And so I start laughing because I think that this person is telling me like, oh my gosh, can you believe this? Like, why would someone say that? And so I'm like, oh, wow, that's ridiculous. And I kind of laugh about it. And she's like, well, what can I tell Father so that he'll know that that's not what's going on? And I was like, oh, like, you actually need my response to that? I just think that the accusation is so ridiculous that who would even consider that? Because if you want to look at the list of patients I've seen so far, it's been homeless men. And I promise they are not asking for birth control. And so my response, and it was one of those times where I felt like my words were not even my own, but I was like, hey, that was pretty good. I don't know that I would even come up with that. But my response was, I don't have anything to say because there's nothing that I can say that would make the truth more true. So but I don't know, tell them that. But kind of, I think continuing to search for the truth in everything, but then also not to ignore it or deny it or turn away from it when you do find it, even when it's difficult, has been a big thing for me in all of this. And I at no point will think that I know everything, and sometimes I wish that I didn't know things that I do know. And but there, I was saying with the last guy, I think people enjoyed hearing about his experiences as a Mason and how he came out of it. And I do have a little story to share. This was before COVID happened, but my husband was somewhat invited, which doesn't line up with the stories we hear that you have to ask, that you shouldn't be invited to join the local group of weirdos here. So he has a couple of acquaintances, I would say, not even real friends, that are in that. And somehow it came up, and he is not a practicing Catholic. He doesn't go with us to mass or anything. We pray that he joins us, every single day. So he did not appreciate it as in the same way that I did, as far as like, hey, yeah, you don't want to do that. So he went through with trying to, whatever the process is, apply or whatever. And it sounds kind of like a democratic process where they vote for a new applicant. I'm sure my words are all wrong, but so I believe they need a unanimous, approval by everyone who's voting to let someone in or keep some, whatever. So it seemed like a complete, like there was no reason that anyone should vote against because he, he was invited by two people who knew him or whatever. And so the day comes where they're voting, and he then finds out the next day that he didn't get in, and he was like, what? Like, what do you mean I didn't get in? Like, you invited me to go through this, and I was just kind of, it sounded like something to do with friends or whatever. And like, I think he was more kind of bothered by the fact that he was rejected than the actual not getting into the Masons kind of thing, like he didn't even really care about that. He just was looking at a group of guys as friends. And it turns out that one of the guys just he was relatively newer, but he just wanted to test the system. So evidently if there's one no, then you're not in. So he wanted to test the system and vote no to see if, okay, is he still going to be let in because he's friends with these guys? Or does the system work where one no means he doesn't get in? So, so my husband was not let in because some young guy wanted to test their system. And I see that as a huge blessing, a huge grace. And, they said, I don't know, like, if he wanted to go to the next town over and get in with them, and then he could still go to this one. And he's like, no, I don't care. It wasn't about that. And I have no interest in doing that. And he doesn't see it as the way that I do, but yeah, it wasn't something that he pursued after that, but I really look at it as what a blessing that was.
Um, yeah. So did you get removed from this volunteer job at the church?
No, no. Everything had been going well with that, and we actually ended up becoming I don't busier, bigger than I would have ever thought. Like, I just wanted to help, you know, the least of these to to love God. And slowly but surely, through word of mouth, I never did it, like I didn't do any advertising or anything like that. I mean, I was volunteering. I wasn't trying to get anything out of this,
Right.
other than distract myself from the world. And um people started asking, hey, can you prescribe, I don't know if I'm allowed to say ivermectin or if that gets flagged. Pretty much, can you prescribe whatever, provide appropriate treatment for this virus going around? So I started, doing that, following evidence-based protocols that are available. And yeah, that became kind of part of what I was doing. I was, seeing just as many of those patients as I was the homeless, but for different reasons, because the homeless weren't getting sick still with that. And that, yeah, that kind of segues into some of the other my bullet points for talking about that, like other things that were other red flags, or by the, kind of confirming what I was already suspicious of. Um, in the course of 2 years, so the 2 years following that, I took care of over 2,500 people with COVID, and a lot of them were not even, people that I knew personally. Like, it was, hey, so and so is sick, or a friend of mine, or people who I didn't know personally, but they would get my contact information from someone they knew who knew me, and no one died. No one who I took care of died. So, pretty my statistics are better than the hospitals or clinics or whatever. And I had 4 patients who I said, I'm like, okay, because your oxygen level is so low, like I have to say that you need to go to the ER. I know you don't want to, but you need oxygen. And, even if you refuse admission, just sit there for a little while and get some oxygen. But like, I can't tell you it's okay to stay home when your oxygen is so low. So after that, after the first one of those, I started ordering um, home oxygen, like that you can send an order through a home health organization or agency or whatever, someone who does home care services. And then typically insurance covers it. And, there's more documentation that goes with it. Well, that went well for about 3 weeks, and people were getting set up with oxygen at home, and they were recovering and taking the prescribed treatments and getting better. And then all of a sudden, all of these agencies stopped accepting my orders for oxygen, saying that I was an outside provider. I wasn't within their system, so they were no longer going to honor my orders. However, if I wanted to order a pair of diabetic shoes or a walker or a shower chair or something like that, those would be just fine. It was just the oxygen that they would not accommodate, which is obvious that if the patient gets oxygen at home, they don't end up in the ER for oxygen and admission for COVID treatment, and the hospital doesn't get their, extra money for that case. So I was not willing to just send patients back to the hospital. So got some donations from some patients and friends, and we invested in some oxygen concentrators, so oxygen machines that I would loan out for folks who needed them when their oxygen was low. And from that point on, ever since I started prescribing the oxygen, I didn't have anyone who needed hospitalization after that. So that whole thing, that whole part of it too is like it's just so obvious. They're trying to funnel people into the hospital to check a box to get more money. And it's not, it's like I can't even think that it's as nefarious as it seems, because I think that it just comes back to money and higher up positions in administration or whatnot, making decisions for the budget and not for the community or for the people. And the people in between, including the doctors and nurses, following orders is what it comes down to, so they're doing as they're told and ignoring what's really going on. And yeah.
So, so obviously you're still in this hospital, you're still kind of doing this stuff. When are you starting to kind of put some stuff together, and what's your kind of theory on what happened?
Okay. Well, so let's see. So fall of, I'm thinking back now. Nope, it would have been 2020. So yeah, winter of 2020 was actually specifically Advent of 2020. This was another thing. I was like, what the heck is going on? We were at Mass, and it was the first Sunday of Advent, and the wonderful priest gave us a little introduction. He said he was going to be offering Mass ad orientem, which just means facing the altar, and the priest's back is to the people. And he explained it as like we're all riding on a bus together and we're facing the same direction and that kind of stuff. So it made sense. And I was like, wow, I'm staring at the crucifix during the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and this is impacting me in a different way than Mass ever has before. And it feels positive. So why is this only like a right now thing? How come this isn't an all the time thing? That's all I'm thinking. I wasn't really asking anyone. And then in his homily, he assured everyone that he had permission from the bishop to do this. And I was that stuck. Like, that was kind of like one of the things that was like, huh? I'm like, wait a minute, like that was a good thing. That was, it made sense. Like, why did you need permission? And I didn't ask, I went to Google, of course, to say like, what is this ad orientem? Why does it? And that is where, the volcano opened up and kind of exploded in my head. And then it was like, everything was just in lockstep, I guess, with, because then I was also going down the rabbit hole of Vatican II and everything else. And then I started listening to EMJ and E. Michael Jones, and a lot of dots were being connected that, maybe I was connecting dots that aren't really connected, but I think that for the greater part that, they are, it's just not as obvious. But um, yeah, I would say that seeing the parallels between the deep state and the deep church is kind of really what was the most earth shaking for me personally.
And did E. Michael Jones help you with those connections?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. And so there's almost a point when you were kind of almost obsessed with that happens sometimes. You almost like
I would,
you look at a piece and you want to figure out the next piece and the
yeah,
next piece.
yep. And I would warn anyone else going down these rabbit holes to not prioritize the how over the why, because I think that that can be so distracting to want to understand everything so much and so in depth, but then at the same time you lose track of why you want to know it or why you want to understand it. And if you want to, and which we should be focusing on is, our closeness to God um and the sacraments, then putting so much effort into um how we got to where we are, like, just pray and trust that God and Our Lady will reveal things that are necessary for you to know. And at the same time, know that if something's not being revealed to you, it's just not time yet. So don't spin your wheels trying to figure something out just because you want to know it, I guess.
I was going back and forth with a. I'm setting something up right now with a presentation, and we were doing it. It seems really obvious, and I think I would agree with my process over the. It's been a while now. That the endeavor, because there's a lot of times in life it's not about the destination, it's about the process, and there's a lot of beautiful truth to that.
Mhm,
But with this kind of research, if it's not leading you back to Christ and to holiness, then the process itself can become an idol.
yes.
I actually literally typed that out this morning, and I think you just said that. Um, and one of the things I'm very thankful for, and I don't think a lot of people get this, that you can go so deep into the deep state and look at Vatican II and look at, the apocalyptic images there in the Vatican and the upside down crosses and the red shoes, that you can go through all of that and actually realize um, at some point to come out the other side that this is a place where Christ uniquely inhabits the mystical body of the church and he's there along with the apocalyptic images and everything else. So but reality is riddled with paradoxes, and that's why Christ constantly tries to always with the point of bringing you to him, like the Blessed
Hmm.
Mother. I'm bringing you back to the Son. And so I found that when I did this, then I had this. When I discovered this, I had the church, and being close to the church is being close to the Blessed Mother, is being close to Christ, instead of going round and round and round. And what's the, because these do become dead ends.
Hmm.
So at one point, we need to know enough that this is an interconnected, as I said a few weeks ago, grand conspiracy, and it's a conspiracy against Christ and his church. And eventually you got to something like that, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yeah, yes. And I would say that kind of like the internal thought process that I experienced was more specifically on truth, like and trusting God over myself. And in our modern age, it's, you're applauded for being independent and strong, especially as a female, self-sufficient, self-reliant, and all of these things. And not only does that become a stumbling block in marriage, however, but
Mhm.
it also will become a stumbling block in your salvation because you can't get anywhere on your anywhere that you want to be, anywhere that you should be, I guess. That I need God, and I was allowed, by his grace to be in a position um where he was all I could focus on, where I'm like, okay, all of my hard work got me to be around a bunch of homeless people. No, but that I lost my income, but at the same time, I don't know if it's I sometimes would like to say that I am gifted with fortitude, but it might also be some pride that is, masked, to say that, well, I lost my job at this organization. I'm not going to just turn around and go and work somewhere else doing the same thing because it's the same story at this place, and this place. So that was, why I just volunteered, because I kind of thought I was going to just stay busy, weather the storm. This will blow over at first, like, oh, things will go back to normal after this. And then it's like, the more you see and the more you learn, and you're like, nope, we're not going back. Like, there's no turning around.
You saw that, you said that a lot of people had questions or maybe they left the, healthcare, but then they ended up coming back, and the new normal, a lot of
Yep.
us, not just in healthcare, are kind of lost in this new normal, and, we probably should be a little bit more vigilant than the world probably wants us to be right now.
Yeah. There was, I had a conversation with a priest friend, and kind of just, venting about the frustrations of, student debt and family and blah, blah, blah. And kind of talking about, maybe taking a job somewhere, well, the vaccine mandates are done. I haven't signed my life over to anything else. I was just, you know, arguing with the all of the things that we struggle with in life. And, in my head, and verbalizing some of it to him. And, and he said, well, yeah, the vaccine mandates are done for now. And then that was kind of the key, that like, oh yeah, like there is no going back. Another thing that I kind of struggled with is, after graduating with, my last, the graduate degree to be a nurse practitioner, the things that would frustrate me about the outpatient side of healthcare, I would kind of lean on the idea, like, well, I could just go back to the hospital, or, like, that's been my home for so long, like, get back to the inpatient side of things, and then forgetting that, oh yeah, it's different. Like, it's not, I can't just go back, you know, I can't, like, that what would have been my plan B. Like, if I hate my job now, I can always just go back to what I used to do, but I can't, because they changed everything. So it's like, I would say maybe a little bit of bitterness on that end
Yeah,
too.
but the way you would frame your decision, your cost benefit
Mhm.
this time around, it's your lead priority would be, is that the will of God in my life at this
Yes.
moment?
Yep. Yep. Mhm.
Something struck me. I was in, this should be 101 common sense to most people, but I was listening to my car radio. I think it was yesterday. I think it was Valentine's Day, whatever that was that 2 days ago, I don't know. And, it was yesterday, and I don't usually listen to the radio in my car, but I was stuck in traffic, and it was down here where I live, 9 out of 10 stations are Spanish, so there's only, like, 3 English anyway, so I got to one, there's one that's a Zio Christian, and I hate it, I know, but I flipped it for a moment, this afternoon, and they're talking about on Valentine's Day, and it was actually pretty good. This idea that we are told by the world to move toward our perfect other, our soulmate, and why that doesn't really, if you're looking for happiness in that, you tend not to find it, and the relationships when you go in with that attitude tend not to work as well as people that just do it in the old-fashioned kind of way, and you're in it. and you just do it. And so the paradox in there is that when we look for happiness, we don't find it. True joy comes in losing ourselves in commitments to others, which seems so obvious, but I don't know, the way it was explained was like, we have the drive inside of us. You go home at night, you want to watch Fox News or flip on some videos, or do X, Y, and Z. But if you flip that around and said, spend time with this kid's schoolwork, help your wife out and do this and that, suddenly, wow, all these things that should be a drag, I actually feel better about myself. And it's obvious because we always do that. When we have a full day of work, at the end of the day, we're more satisfied than when we sit on our butts all the time. But yet we just damage ourselves and we go through this endless pursuit of empty happiness. And it's so hard to figure out. And all these things that the church are telling us, the perennial truths, are always telling us that. But sometimes, maybe it's just me, I'm so hard-headed. So I just think there's profound wisdom in that. And when we think this on large in the situation that was presented to us, I think what I'm getting from your story and so many others is Jesus has tasked us with something. He's tasked us to come near to him. And what is Christ? Christ is truth. And so what is the road to truth? Is it always breezy and cheesy? No, it's not. But the deep, because I think we have to know we do need to be wise as serpents in the world, but yet we can get lost in this stuff. And even the process itself, we're tangling with some elemental spirits that can get the best of us. So we really do have to have our heads screwed on about this. So I don't think, I think people do need to know some basics of the deep state, and their objective, in my opinion, is to overthrow Christ and his church. And so without some idea that this is an organized force, they've been at this a long time and they're serious about it. And unlike our revealed faith that's all in the open, they don't. They're enemies and they work in secret. And so we need to kind of have this position that we recognize it, it's evil, being able to kind of force it, but always coming back again, I believe, to helping our strength, helping our own faith walk. And again, like that sounds so easy. I think it's shocking that someone calling themselves Dr. Deep State would say, "Oh wow, there's finding happiness. There really is. I mean, you can find that in a frickin' Hallmark card or something, right?" But it hit me in a big way that everything, when there's great darkness in the world, depending on how we adjust our lenses, there's also great light to approach and to be had from that very overwhelming seeming darkness. And I guess what I'd say is you don't want to overdo the black pill stuff and the social media that goes round and round. You kind of want to know what's going on, and you don't want to get lost in that world. But I mean, who doesn't do? You're doing this, and you're going to this page, and the world's falling apart here, and we're going to have an economic collapse next week, and here's World War III, and you just feel like, ew, get this crap off me. But somewhere, if we tweak ourselves just right, the joy of Christ can be found among all of this craziness. What do you
Well, the
reckon?
other thing too is, I think, it gets very easy, especially, well, as a Catholic or Christian or anyone, to wonder if we are in the end times or whatever, because things are so bad and so many people are being so stupid and whatever. But um, to, read about the lives of the saints from centuries ago and to learn their perspective of the world that they were living in and how unholy and bad things were for them too. It's like, you know, maybe we are and maybe we're not in the end times, but at the same time, that doesn't change um what our goal is and what our objectives are and how we should live. We, should be living as if we are, and praying as if we are, but carrying on as if we're not. So
Yeah. Yeah. During the darkness of the Protestant Reformation, when the church was being split, the mystical body is being split in two. And, the new sects are not out there winning souls to Christ. They're simply taking people out of the mystical body and giving them a new doctrine. And with the shock of that and the wars going on in Europe, but yet at the same time, Christ is bringing up saints, some of the most remarkable saints at the same time. Or the Blessed Mother will do a visit to the New World, and suddenly you have these hardened uh, pagans, for lack of a better word, having this visitation, um, and just in record numbers, radical transformation of life, record numbers of baptisms. That and you know, I rarely meet anybody that really appreciates what the Guadalupe really is and what a miracle this was for the Mexican people, and it's so lost on them. I deal with them every day, So when I really found out about, just in the macro sense, that when this darkness came over here, Blessed Mother took up the slack and said, "I'll start building the church over here," in insanely miraculous ways. And we have to remind ourselves, like the wisdom of the saints, that these we may be in the end times, we may be at the end of an era, we do not know, but amazing things are happened in the heights of what seems like the darkness, like the world is falling apart. And so the attitude, just like of any relationship, the attitude we have of Christ is one of openness and gratefulness. And like our Pope has said, he is the God of surprises. So who knows what's going to happen? I'm messing with you a little bit there, but but who knows? And I mean, if I have any takeaway advice, I think it's awaiting all of us. Some of this deep joy is awaiting us, and we just can't get lost in this black pill kind of stuff. And so I'm Dr. Deep State, and there is a point of knowing this so that we can be on guard. But boy, I can tell you, people can get lost in this stuff. They really can. And it can get into this whole, nobody wants to admit it about themselves. Everybody else is a Gnostic except me. But the thing is when you start finding stuff, it's like you have a little edge on somebody else, and then you kind of look down on the normies, and it's got a very Gnostic pride quality that can darken you. And that darkness is where you really let the darkness of the world inside you, because you really want, what the world has is that you got a little bit of something on the world, a little bit of something. And that's a very, very dangerous place to go in that type of Gnostic nook. There aren't easy answers. We really do have to hold these things together. But somehow that is the story of redemption history, that in the midst of darkness, Christ is there, if we're really willing to. And the problem is that requires humility. Sometimes God has to break us to see it, and sometimes we just need to kind of remind ourselves, why am I not experiencing the deeper sense of joy that I have in other parts of my Christian life? And I think that's what we sometimes have to ask about. The source of all our sins, the Padre told me in confession a few weeks ago, is of course pride. So maybe our very own pride. We can look at the whole world and connect dots, and it seems so clever, and now I'm outside of it. But it comes back to this source of pride, and the pride that maybe we might take in finding this stuff out. So, and that's the reality of our existence. Each day is a struggle in a good way. Everything about our life, we want things to be easy. And when I sit around here and have too much time, I'm really the least happy I can in my own quote unquote freedom. It's not just, it's an irony. It's crazy, but that's how the world seems to be constructed. So, what do you think right now, pulling this part together, all these pieces together? It's strengthened your faith and given you some kind of sense of what's going on.
I would say maybe clarity, or like a sense of clarity. I still might be the most confused person I know, but no, I feel like that, yeah, I've been graced with at least as much clarity as I need to fulfill my, duties and according to my vocations. And um, you were talking about Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Champion, um, in the state that I'm in, is the only approved Marian apparition in the United States. And her message to Adele Brie was to catechize the children. So with that, we should be catechizing ourselves with the catechism and not with the world. Um, so I think, you know, having clarity and prioritizing what we put into our brains is just so important. Yeah, it doesn't get you anywhere to to know something worldly more than someone else. It gets
It
you
has
more.
its limitations. It has its But, at the same time, people go, why bother knowing anything at all? Some people can say, sometimes if knowing something, it's a balance, isn't it? Like so many things in our life. But, and yeah, it sounds like you fell in love with the TLM. So
Yes. I found it and I would say it sucked me in. And yeah, it's beautiful. And, not to say, I'm in no position to determine one thing or another about the new mass versus the old mass. So I guess I won't go there. Um, but I will say, go where you can find Jesus.
yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. I agree. I think we're going to wrap this up. And it's been a joy having you on and sharing your story. And I am just going to leave it at that. And any parting thoughts? Pretty good.
I think I said everything that I thought about talking about.
Okay. So, everybody, we are going to wrap up for today. We're going to be back. I'm going to have a show for y'all next week. We're going to be filming on the 22nd, and we have a professor over in France that's going to give us a European perspective on the world. I'm very excited about that. He's put in some real work to give you a presentation about things that the mainstream isn't, both the condition of the TLM and the regular mass over in Europe, and how the church is coping with the massive crisis over there. So I hope to have that out for you by the end of next week. But for now, this has been Dr. Deep State. And obviously, I'm not Will Tucker here, but I'm going to see everybody. I hope you all are doing very well. And we'll be speaking very soon. So goodbye, everyone.
Hi.